Due to Ontario's guidelines, we are presenting these live streaming events in a virtual environment to keep everyone safer. We hope you will join us in the next several weeks. Please stay safe and stay well. Today we're going to have all of our experts on board with us to field your questions and to respond to some questions that have been posted, both video questions and audio questions from community members. We encourage you to engage with us. The contact information should be on your screen now, and don't hesitate to ask us questions. We've got 3 experts here today that are probably familiar to you now. We've got Bethany Hallboom, Socioeconomics Lead. Hi, Bethany.
Hello, Don.
We've got John Cooper, Water Resources Engineer with SNC Lavalin. John, are you there?
Yeah, good to be here, Don.
Good to have you here. And we've got Ange Brooks, our Senior Ecologist. Ange, do we have you on the line there?
Yes, we do.
Excellent.
Hi, Don.
Everybody's on board. We've got them all together through the miracles of modern technology. I can't believe we pulled it all off. So anyhow, it's good to have you all here. Today's session will be a mix of video and audio questions, as well as comments from community members, followed by roundtable discussion with our experts. Just a note to our experts, don't hesitate to jump in and add comments whenever you feel like it. We want this to be a discussion. We hope that we get some texts and emails from community members asking questions or giving comments, and just have a really good wholesome discussion today. So before we get started, we'd like to show you a video of a discussion between 2 Webequie community members that are currently living in Thunder Bay about some of the challenges that are faced by living in the community, and how sometimes these challenges force community members to move to urban centers. I think you'll find it really interesting. Let's take a look at that, then we'll come back and have a little discussion. So let's cue that video now, control room.
There are many reasons that the community members want to move from the community to access better healthcare and better education, or even to get a better job. Lorraine, أشجع ga bedagos naman, or kabidibis naman. We'll be there about 5 minutes. All right. Yeah, this is Leslie. So we're on our way to interview Lorraine Whitehead. and she moved out of the community over a decade ago, and I guess she wanted to get a better education, a better life.
State
your name and where you're from.
Lorraine Whitehead. I am from Wabakwe First Nation.
So how long ago did you move from Whitehead?
I moved out of Wabakwe about 12 years ago, maybe 14. I don't really remember. I moved initially for school, and I've been in Thunder Bay since. I moved to Thunder Bay because there was a lack of education. So when I moved out, the only education that we had access to at the time was through distant education. I had originally moved away for high school, then college, and I came back out again to study accounting. And when I moved, I brought my daughter out, so she had dreams of becoming a mechanic, and that's something that is not offered on the reserve. If she had stayed on the reserve, she wouldn't have that opportunity to study to be one.
We got a job mission and the nakwe tamanohaji to the manohod.
You see, but don't laugh. See who can laugh without laughing longest. Okay, it's there. Go ahead.
What?
Come on, you can last longer than that. Okay, and 3, 2, 1, stare and see who can last and go.
I forgot to mention better housing.
Better housing? Is that a major?
Yeah,
oh, you guys have got no housing.
Yeah, no house, right? Remember I jumped from house to house? Yeah.
Tell me about housing. Tell me about the housing situation.
So, community members. The only reason why the community members, some community members, are wanting to move from the res to the cities because they want better access to education, health, and housing. Because there's a lack of education and a lack of healthcare and lack of housing.
Okay, we're back. I hope everyone enjoyed that video. It was pretty interesting and revealing video. I think there's a lot of information there that a lot of people don't know. There's a couple of issues that were brought up during that video that are not exclusive to Webakwe, but they're common to many northern.
Be looking at, if there's a lack of availability, then and there's this, the road being built, or potentially being built, then there may be, for example, community members who want to come back to the community and be able to live there and have the connections to the community and serve their community. Then more housing, essentially, we need to know what kind of housing needs there are and the potential demand for that that would increase potentially with the road being built. And community members might be interested in future job opportunities that would then require some kind of availability of housing. There's also the quality of housing that we have to consider, and we know that there's existing issues in a number of First Nation communities around major repairs that are required or overcrowding. And again, the overcrowding is an issue that ties to availability of housing and affordability. So we also need to make sure that housing is affordable, and the potential for jobs arising through the supply road and the developments that are facilitated from that could increase incomes and allow making for more housing affordability. That's the housing component. confident that we would be those kinds of issues and potential impacts and kind of benefits that could arise from the or through the environmental impact assessment of the supply road.
No, that's great, Bethany. Yeah, those are big issues in communities, as you just talked about, and you know, it's overcrowding, it's quality of housing, it's the cost of housing. There's so many issues there. Education, there's an issue there where quite often community members leave and get their education, but even with their education, they're not able to go back to their community because there aren't jobs there. So it's a real challenge, isn't it? But I'm glad you're going to be sort of diving
Yeah,
deeper
sorry, I
into
didn't
that.
speak. Yes, sorry, I didn't speak to the education issue, which is also huge. And there's a lack of access often to higher levels of education specifically, and also training needs that, you know, again, a road could potentially facilitate access to that, or there could be to education, higher education, being easier to access, or training needs being able to easier to meet through, you know, the road networks, potentially, you know, benefits arising from the supply road as well, leading to increased opportunities for education on the reserve as well.
No, it's a great point, Bethany. And another point that I often hear is that, you know, something like an all-season road would allow community members, parents, to see their kids more often after they go off to high school or college, because they just can't that often without being a remote community. It's very difficult because it's well over $1,000 for, you know, to fly into Thunder Bay too. So that's a big issue as well.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, it's really important for youth to have those visits from their parents, and provide that support when they have moved away from their communities. They're living on their own, perhaps for the first time in larger urban centers, and having that, you know, being able to have their family members visit more often would mean a lot, I would think, in terms of the support that they could get and being able to, you know, carry on with their studies or their jobs in these urban environments.
It's a big adjustment, isn't it, Bethany? Going from you know, a rural community to an urban community, it's a totally different world, and it presents a lot of real challenges, for sure. So, no, thanks for that, Bethany. Now I think we're going to move on to show you a short video on caribou, and the star of the video is Samson from Webequie Community, talking a bit about caribou and. Reminder just to call in with your questions. The contact information should be on your screen. So let's look at that video and then we'll come back and we'll talk to you, Ange. So let's watch that video and we'll talk to you in probably 1 to 2 minutes.
The winter time.
I remember you told me once that there's a route that they usually run through, like a pathway that they run through.
Oh yeah, there is. There's a path. You know where the winter road starts. That crossing there. There's a like a path. Kind of looks like a skittle path right now. Skittle trail path right now. That used to be the old caribou path.
Samson, how are caribou different from moose? Like, how are their habits different? How are their habitats different? Are they bigger or smaller than moose?
Caribous are quite smaller than the moose.
So Samson, is there a specific time of the year when caribou hunting is done?
Most people prefer during the winter because during the summertime, I guess the caribou has, you know, a different appetite during that time, and people would notice the taste, and they would prefer the winter season to harvest caribou because they don't taste as bitter as during the summertime.
Tell our viewers a bit about what's happening right now. There's the caribou collaring survey that we're undertaking in the Webequie area. Can you walk us through what's going on right now on that?
Yeah, sure, Don. We have crews up in Webequie right now. They're actually starting today. So we have 2 crews of 2. One crew will be flying in a helicopter running transects looking for herds of caribou and then reporting to the other crew who will be in the helicopter with our net gunning person. And the objective of the program is to collar 30 female caribou. Probably, I think they're gonna try to get 30 caribou in less than 8 days. They could get up to 8 a day if possible. I think that's the maximum that time would allow, as long as they're able to find all the animals. And not only are they going to be collaring the caribou, they'll be taking hair samples, they'll be taking a blood sample to test for pregnancy, and they'll be taking a sample of the pellets for DNA analysis, just for an overall health examination of the caribou.
Oh, wow, that's
So yeah, interesting. So they use a net gun. There's no anesthetic involved at all.
Wow, sounds exciting, Ange. Sounds
Yeah,
really
it does.
exciting,
I know.
yeah.
I wish I could go.
Yeah. Too bad we're sitting in chairs, eh?
Yeah.
Well, we actually got a couple of questions. I've got one question here, and I think this can be tag team effort, John and Ange. So maybe, John, you can kick this one off. The question is, this came in by text. How will water be studied specifically? And then the other question is, will it be done on a watershed basis?
Yeah, good questions, Don. So in terms of water, we're going to look at the water quality. So as part of the baseline study, we're actually out in the field taking samples. They get sent back to the lab to look at various parameters, so to understand what the chemistry of the water is, before the project is built or anything is built. The second part of that is sort of the quantity of water. So we're also looking at sort of how much flow occurs across the watersheds, the seasonality of it. And that's, again, to understand the baseline, but also just understand what the changes might be in terms of engineering and in terms of once infrastructure is in place. You want to design according to the conditions, you don't change anything. So I guess in terms of the watershed, yeah, so we're looking at both sort of regional watersheds, so sort of the Webequie area as a whole, and then sort of your sub-watersheds being each individual water crossing. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Thanks, John. We got another text here. This one's, I think this one's for you, Bethany. What data are you looking for socioeconomic studies, and how will First Nations participate? Good question.
Really good. Yeah, very good question. So we'll be collecting information from a variety of different sources. We'll be looking at community documents such as economic development plans and community land use plans, community comprehensive plans if they're available and recent. And if there's some outdated information, we certainly would need to collect it through primary information sources such as surveys, as well as focus groups that we would conduct with so small subgroups of the communities such as women, elders, and youth to understand their perspectives and experiences of socioeconomic conditions. And so really what we're trying to do is fill all the gaps that we can by using a variety of information sources, and most importantly is to have that community input and participation through filling out surveys, and participating in focus groups, and also some key informant interviews with band administration staff, for example. But the way that we actually administer these, decide which to use or which not to use in terms of like being surveys versus focus groups. We want to try and use them all, but if there are sort of certain preferences or comfort levels within the community for particular approaches, then we need to know that as well first.
That's good. Thanks, Bethany. It just goes to show us how much work is involved in an environmental assessment, how many different types of experts, how many different types of studies are involved in environmental assessment. It's pretty comprehensive activity. We got another video coming up starring Samson, who was in our previous video. Samson's a Webequie community member, and this time he's talking about the most popular fish species in the Webequie area with community members. So let's have a look at that video now, and then we'll come back and talk to Ange again. So cue up the video.
Fish for? What are the ones that community members like?
Basically, walleye, sucker, whitefish, sturgeon, and pike are the main fish.
Where do your community members go fishing? Do they fish all over Webequie traditional lands?
They fish all over the area, and sometimes specific sites for different seasons.
So do community members do a lot of ice fishing?
That's one of the favorite things that the community members do. At least a dozen people every day.
Do community members fish from the shoreline or mainly from boats?
Both. Yeah, certain areas they would go on shore and fish from there.
Hey, we're back. And Samson mentioned in that video some important species to the community. Can you tell us briefly about some of the fisheries work that's been done to date on the environmental assessment?
Sure. So far we've done a number of different fisheries studies. So we've completed a spring spawning survey, some fish community surveys, and some just general fish habitat assessment at many of the water crossings.
Okay, that's good. We have another text. They're just rolling in these texts. This one's a tough one. You guys can decide amongst yourselves who wants to answer it or how you want to deal with it. So I think John will be answering part of this, I think. How are cumulative impacts and climate change being considered for road studies? Maybe, John, do you want to tackle the climate change part of that?
Sure. Thanks, Don.
No problem.
So it's kind of a two-phased or two-faucet issue, I guess, in terms of the proposed infrastructure. The first one is obviously once you build the road, you want to make sure that future climate won't affect the road or won't alter it, such that it's not usable, right? You don't want washouts or crossings to be undersized given future conditions. So as part of the proposed study, or the study, I guess, the proposed designs, we're looking at what the flow regime would be in the future. So let's say we're designing the crossings for, a probability of a 1 in 50 year return event. So the likelihood of it occurring is 1 every 50 years. Not to say that it can occur more frequently, but that's just a general term. What that 1 in 50 year flow would look like in the future. So if it's say 10 now, is that same return event going to be 15, 20? Can we expect more flow more frequently in the future or less? And sort of design the road according to, not just today's snapshot of time, but how it might look in the future. So, you get the most bang for your for your buck, so to speak, but also that the proposed road and the function of it, works for multi generations, not just servicing now. And then along with that, we're also looking at the proposed effect the road would have on climate change in sort of the regional and global context. So more looking at increased air pollution and what that effect would have.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, John. Next, how about cumulative impacts? Who wants to tackle that one? Ange, you got any ideas on that?
Sure. Cumulative impacts is really complicated. It's
That's why I
something that,
challenged you with it, Ange.
yeah, thanks. It's going to be a big part of the environmental assessment. So you have to look at the combined effects of past things that may have happened, present, so for, in this case, the road, and then any future impacts as well. And you kind of package those all together to come up with these cumulative impacts. And it's every single VEC valued ecological component has to be included in that cumulative effects assessment. So for example, like John will have to do that for water, and Bethany will have to do that from a socioec perspective, and I'll be doing it from well, not just me, but our team, like from all aspects of biology, the caribou, the wolverine, the fish, birds, all of that. So it's extremely complex to that we're going to have to work through that.
Well, especially, Ange, when you're also looking at planned future projects, right? You don't even know
That's the thing.
a lot of details about those projects. So there's a little bit of, what do you call it, crystal ball gazing, I think, isn't there, to some degree?
Yes. So we have to think about what other projects might be happening in the area in the future. And it could be going, as far ahead as 20 years or more. Yeah. So yeah, it is kind of like a crystal ball thing.
Yeah. That's we're going to be drawing on your special abilities, Ange, to see the future. Next, we've got a couple of videos from Leslie, another community member who's currently living in Thunder Bay, talking about the importance of water to the community and the cultural significance of water. Let's have a look at those, and then we'll come back and target John with some more questions.
It's very important to us because we are mostly surrounded by water. Most of my reserve is water, and we live on an island called Eastwood Island. We use the water, such as the river plus lake, are used for transportation to get to our camp or trap lines, and we get water to we get fresh lake water for consumption, and there's spring water that certain people know where to get. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, we're back. John, it's very clear, especially from that video, that clean water is incredibly important to community members, as it should be. From an engineering perspective, John, what are some of the water-related considerations on this project?
As the community member mentioned, Weberquay is essentially surrounded by a huge amount of water, right? So obviously the big consideration is water. In terms of the proposed road and the actual engineering infrastructure, some of the aspects of the water are, obviously how to cross them. There's a lot of water course crossings. There's a lot of little streams, some larger rivers as well, and actually to get to the island itself is a challenge, right? So there's a lot of, so you have to kind of know how much water you're dealing with, so the qualitative or quantitative, in order to get, you know, the sizing of the crossings. You also want to know things like the chemistry, like how is the water composed? Like, is it acidic? Is it basic? Does it have various chemical elements naturally occurring in them? And that can help you select materials, right? Because obviously, if you put, say, a culvert in, you want something that'll last, something that's robust. So you need to know, you know, the parameters in which you're placing that material. Same with the soil, you know, similar concerns. You want to know what the makeup of the soil is so you can put the appropriate material in it. Also, how much groundwater you have, or spring water, as it's sometimes referred to, where it occurs. You want to understand sort of the interaction the road will have on that, because, you know, as the community is aware, it's a good source of drinking water, especially in sort of camp or some of the remote locations. So you want to make sure whatever you design is not affecting how it naturally occurs, and how groundwater naturally flows as well. So there's a lot of importance and emphasis is put it and should be put on water.
That's good, John. Thanks for that. That's really, really helpful. Next up, we have a comment and a question from Roy, who's a Webequie community member. Let's listen to Roy and maybe discuss what he's talking about when we come back. This is an audio question, I think, right?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm calling from Webequie. My name is Roy Spence. Hi, good afternoon. I'm calling from Webequie. My name is Roy Spence. Hi, good afternoon. I'm calling from Webequie. My name is Roy Spence. I'd like to ask you questions regarding the Webequie Supply Road, the proposed Webequie Supply Road from Webequie to Ring of Fire. How that road's going to benefit for my community and my people. What is going to impact on my traditional territory about this project? The road, possibly the mine in the future. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, we're back. Anyone want to jump in and respond to Roy's question? There's a lot there. Oh, so Roy was talking about how sorry, I didn't realize our experts don't get to hear the question. So the question was basically, you know, how is my community going to benefit from this project, and asking about sort of how impacts will be investigated. So maybe I can talk about the community benefiting from the project. You know, this is a supply road, so Webequie is the proponent of this environmental assessment. Their hope is that by having this all-season supply road, community road, it will facilitate their ability to participate in any of the activities associated with the exploration and development of the mineral resources in the area. So it's a way for Webequie to actually participate economically and enjoy the benefits of the development that may take place in that area. So the other aspect of Roy's question was more about sort of investigation of impact. So I mean, I think our team has talked quite a bit about that. You know, we were looking at socioeconomic impacts. We're looking at natural environment impacts, a whole range of impacts. So we probably have answered part of that, I think, in that question. Does anyone want to jump in and talk?
Well, I would, yeah, if you don't mind, I could also
Sure.
mention too that there's other important impacts, of course, that we haven't mentioned, and we may, obviously there's only a subset of experts here, which doesn't represent the range of kind of topics we have to explore in an impact assessment, but certainly things like an Indigenous knowledge and land use impacts to Indigenous knowledges and land use, and how those are going to be considered are often done through a separate kind of study by experts in those areas, with often a fair amount of mapping involved in terms of Indigenous knowledge and land use kind of sites that aren't necessarily shared publicly, but certainly to understand impacts on Aboriginal and potential impacts on Aboriginal and treaty rights. That's a really critical component, as well as country foods consumption and understanding what country foods are eaten and any potential for contamination of those foods, as well health studies, and that's part of a larger health study as well, looking at health potential impacts on health. So understanding, what health is to the community, what it means, and then what should be measured and understood in terms of, physical aspects of health and social aspects, connections to land and environment and water, and how all of those could be potentially affected, and then think about the broader impacts on health and well-being.
No, that's good. Thanks, Bethany. I'm glad you added that. And we do have a health survey coming up in the not so distant future, right? Don't we?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, will be. I think there'll definitely be a survey, and also most likely some focus groups as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Thanks for that. Okay, next up, we're going to have take a few questions from Samson and Webakwe. Let's listen to the first one, talking about jobs, current or emerging jobs. So, if our crack technical staff can call up that video, we'll play that.
The question is, what are the current and emerging activities, meaning jobs, for the community members in environmental monitoring and related field work for the Webakwe Supply Road?
You can jump in, and anyone else can jump in after that. I think there are going to be a lot of environmental monitoring related jobs created in communities in this region. I think, typically associated with the approval of an environmental assessment, there are recommendations that are provided, and quite often there's compliance monitoring that occurs both during and after construction. So I think, these are probably the emerging jobs. Ange, do you want to jump in on this a little bit?
Sure. I couldn't hear Samson's questions, but I just from what you said, it's regarding monitoring.
That's right.
So,
he's talking
yes.
about opportunities. Will there be opportunities when it comes to environmental monitoring jobs in the future, either from this project or other projects in the region, perhaps?
Yeah, so if we want to just focus on this project, there will be monitoring required during construction. So we're looking quite a ways ahead, from everything from environmental monitoring. So there would be water monitoring, like water samples taking required. There would be fish community monitoring required, erosion and sediment control monitoring around that, and then even looking farther ahead, post construction, depending on what permits and approvals are required, there is a whole set of monitoring requirements embedded within all of those permits, and those last for a number of years, some of them over 10 years long. So we're actually looking for, like, it is a long-term monitoring program overall.
That's good. Thanks for that, Ange. Next up, we've got another video question from audio question from Samson, and this is about water and what is baseline. So let's listen to that, and then we'll come back.
Question number 2, water quality. Do we have baseline data for water in our area, and how would we determine if the water isn't good, and how effective is the water monitoring?
Okay, we're back. So to brief our guests, that question was about water quality, and do we have, are we establishing baseline water quality data, and how will we know if there are impacts from the project? Anyone wants to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I can take this one on. So yeah, as you mentioned, we're doing a baseline study. So in all the water or proposed water crossings, we're taking seasonal, both flow data and water quality samples and sending to the lab. So we have sort of a multi-year, multi-seasoned understanding of how the water quality, is either changing over time or maintain steadiness, right? And then it kind of goes back to Ange's, during construction and then post-construction monitoring. We know how the existing water behaves, both chemically and, the flow regime. And then we can relate or look at the same parameters during construction and post-construction to see if the road has actually changed anything. And that's the point where if something has changed, you can identify what has a negative impact. Can it be changed? Can it be mitigated? So there's a whole bunch of things that can come in, and that's why sort of your baseline data is so important. So you have an understanding of what's occurring now, as well as sort of, the seasonality and the fluctuations that occur naturally, right? Especially with water quality, a lot of elements can occur naturally, and your water quality, isn't necessarily perfect from the get-go, and it's not necessarily the construction's fault, we'll say. So it's really important to understand, so what you're dealing with from the beginning, and then you can sort of monitor it long-term and see if the project has had any changes.
That's good. That's good. Thanks for that, John. Ange, did you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, no, I just got distracted by somebody walking by. No, I don't really have any. Yes, exactly. I don't really have a whole lot else to add to that.
Okay, let's move on to our next clip from Samson. Another question from Samson, and this is about the effectiveness of what we call the floating road, which would be is a different road design through the James Bay lowland or peat areas. So let's go to that clip right now, and we'll come back and talk to John, and maybe if our technical team can do it, maybe they can access that animation that we can show our viewers. So let's go first to Samson's question, and then we'll come back.
Third question was, how effective is this floating road concept? what if all this planning and preparation is so great and then we actually put the plan into practice and it doesn't work for some reason? What happens then?
Loading road work. John,
valid concern, I guess. I mean, that's sort of why it's so important to do a lot of geotech investigations, to sort of understanding what the soil parameters are now, understanding how thick the peat and the muskeg layers are. All those things kind of play into how you would design the road and sort of the materials you would use, and even the methodology of how the road would be constructed. So in terms of provability, I guess, I mean, the concept our team is working with is not a brand new concept. We're not reinventing the wheel. This type of approach has been used elsewhere. I believe it's been used in Manitoba. It's been used in the northern regions for a fair amount of time. Even going back to sort of the old school corridor roads where it's sort of slash and cover with logs, some of those logging roads are still functional after hundreds of years, or maybe 100 years, say. So I mean, the concept works. It's just how do you actually get it to work in a catered environment such as the Webequie area. So that's more of the challenge, and that's where our team's working hard on looking at different approaches, different aggregate sources. And then I guess once the road is built, there will also be a monitoring program associated with that. So, there might be some settling, there might be some soft spots that'll have to be repaired. And there's always going to be some sort of ongoing maintenance with any type of infrastructure. So we're kind of looking at all those things and sort of how all those would play into and try to get a solution that fits all the criteria.
Thanks for that, John. And let me just check with the control room here. Well, we're going to queue up. No, I thought we were going to be able to show the animation, but it looks like we won't be able to show the animation. Maybe later on, if we're lucky, if we have time. We have a little bit of time left. Okay, I'm going to go and dig into my list of questions because we've gotten a number of questions today. Is there access to a map showing where the water crossings are located? John, that looks like it could be an easy one for you.
We have maps. They've been, our team has produced them. I'm not. They should have been publicly available. I believe they would be in one of the reports we've prepared. But if not, I'll make sure we have one put on the website or wherever it is we keep these things.
They'd be in the terms of reference.
Yeah, probably is in the terms of reference, isn't it? Yeah. The crossing locations. And then here's another question. John, you and I can both respond to this. Are there locations where 3-meter peat bogs are shown on the same map? So we did a ground penetrating radar survey a couple of years ago, I believe, of the James Bay lowland section of the route. And doing that, the purpose of doing that is to identify the approximate thickness of peat through the area. So there were maps produced from that. So that identify the thickness in different areas. So we will look into that for sure. Here's another question. What is the projected cost per kilometer of the proposed road? That's a tricky question because it really depends on our level of knowledge really of the terrain, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're sort of in the preliminary engineering phase, so it's going to be more of a larger margin of error in terms of costing, and then as the design gets more refined and our geotech studies are ongoing, we can kind of really hone in on what that number would be. I think the big driving factor now is just aggregate source costing. So all the rock will have to be sort of produced somewhere within the region. So that's a cost. We're also looking at some of the bridge crossings. So the construction of those are going to be a little expensive. So we're kind of refining how those will actually be built, whether they're, shipped up in pieces and the winter roads, or if there's a material that can be used that's a bit lighter to transport. There's a whole bunch of sort of trade-offs that'll have to be considered before you can kind of come up with a real cost for this. I have no idea what the ballpark cost is right now. I'm sure we could look into it. I'm sure it's been calculated somewhere.
Okay, thanks for that, John. Before we go today, there's a couple of things I wanted to just talk about that we're involved with right now, and one of them is the Wolverine survey, which kicked off about 2 weeks ago, I think. Ange, do you think you can tell our viewers a little bit about the Wolverine survey?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dawn's right. It was about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago that our field team went out and installed a bunch of camera traps. Basically what they are is wooden structures that are attached to trees. We have 25 of them. And the idea is that the Wolverine will climb up onto the structure, walk through these two upright wooden poles, and those wooden poles have a bunch of alligator clips attached to them with the intention of being able to take hair samples of the Wolverine. Then he continues on. I mean, it's not even that long. It's not even that big. I'm making them sound huge. They're not huge. So he just walks through the uprights and then looks up above, because what he's actually after is the bait that is hanging above this wooden structure. And when they reach up to grab the bait is when the cameras will be taking pictures of them, because Wolverines have very specific, very distinct colorations between each animal. And when they rear up on their hind legs, we'll be able to see the coloration better. And also we'll be able to tell if that's a male or a female. And that's important for us to know as well. So at each of these wooden structures, there's two cameras. So one's pointed at the platform part of it, and the other one's kind of pointed to take in like the whole structure and if any kind of animal approaches. So those are going to be in place throughout the winter. Community members will be traveling to these locations to replace the baits, because at some point we expect a Wolverine or a lynx or somebody else to come up and take the baits away, so they'll have to be replaced. And this program will be running this year and next year. So we'll be looking for community involvement both years to help us out with that one. And we'll also be looking to community members to help us replace the batteries on the cameras and switch out the SD cards.
Well, Ange, also, you and I saw a picture yesterday sent to us from a community member of a Wolverine on the Winter Road right near Webequay. So let's hope
that was pretty amazing.
Let's hope it climbed up the run pole.
I hope so.
Yeah, let's hope we got some more pictures of it, right? So
yeah, be awesome.
Okay.
Can I ask a question too? Sorry, Don, about that.
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry. Thanks. Are you going to be trying to understand like Wolverine spotting, like looking for or trying to understand indigenous knowledge and observations that local members, indigenous community members might have with respect to Wolverine and caribou?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So that'll all be part of the indigenous knowledge portion of this project. We'll be looking for local hunters, trappers, fishermen, any community members like that can give us additional details around all of those species. In addition to anybody in the community who has any kind of anecdotal observations. We hear there's caribou walking in and around the community, and there's been a Wolverine spotted at the airport. So any kind of information like that is really important for our study.
You know, it's just another reason why it's so important to have community members with us when we do our field work. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to do it to the extent that we've wanted to because of COVID. But I mean, the amount of knowledge that they have provided our staff and it's just so valuable because their knowledge of the land, you know, where the animals are, how they behave, it's just so critical. So, you know, it's funny, Bethany, we've been collecting that information sort of, of course, there's the formal side of the collection of that kind of information, but there's also the informal side, which we've been doing ever since we started doing field work in the area. So we've been able to sort of compile a lot of information associated with these different field studies. So I think that wraps up everything for today. I worked out pretty well. We had a lot of we have one more question, it seems. Okay, here it is. When will preliminary engineering be completed? John, do you want to jump in on that one? I think it's pretty well done, but I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I believe we're just wrapping up the final reports. I don't know if they've gone out to the ministry yet. But yeah, we could look into that. I mean, it should be shortly. I think we've done a fair amount of work, and we kind of know where the roadmap where we're heading. So yeah, that should be out soon, but we can follow up for sure on that one.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Okay, well, thanks to our team here for joining me today. That was really good. It was really helpful. We're going to do this again. There's always a few technical hiccups when you have all these moving parts. So I'm glad our viewers were able to stick it out with us through some of these, and it will be better next time, of course. Thanks again for joining us. We will be continuing with streaming sessions in the next few weeks, so just look for it via the website, social media as well. So let's, we're working on our next set of topics. So look for this. Again, websites got tons of information. We have a lot of social media material that goes out on a regular basis. So we'll talk to you in the next few weeks, and thanks again for joining us. So see you soon.